Good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to extend a warm welcome to all of you on this special webinar. We gather here today with a shared commitment to professional growth and knowledge sharing. To begin with, it is my privilege to introduce our chairman of Direct Tax Committee, CA Piyush Charger sir, a distinguished chartered accountant with over 25 years of professional experience in tax litigation, advisory, financial auditing. As senior partner at Messrs. Charger Doshi Chartered Accountants, Mumbai, he brings a rich foundation backed by a Bachelor of Commerce degree from NM College of Commerce and Economics. And he is also a DISA qualified. He has served 2 terms on the Central Council of ICAI and contributed immensely to the pivotal standing committees Executive, Examination, and Finance. Currently, he ably chairs the Direct Tax Committee and serves as Vice Chairman of the Expert Advisory Committee, roles that demonstrate his strategic leadership in shaping our profession. His influence extends nationally and internationally with active roles in esteemed organizations such as the Asian Federation of Accountants, International Auditing and Assurance Standard Board, and the South Asian Federation of Accountants. In addition, he holds board positions with prominent companies, further highlighting his corporate governance expertise. Beyond his professional pursuits, he deeply engaged in community and social welfare. On behalf of everyone, I welcome you, sir, and I request you to please address our members.
Thank you very much. A very good evening to all of you. Thank you, Deepika, for your wonderful introduction and agreeing to moderate the session. Uh, Very learned senior advocate, I would say CA Tushar Himani, who is also an advocate by profession, and one of the youngest to be designated as a senior advocate, and also chairman of Direct Tax Committee of All India Federation of Tax Practitioners. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation, Tusharji. I'm really obliged to you for coming on our platform of our ICI. My younger brother, very able and himself being a tax expert. You would have heard him last week also. CA Vishnu Agarwal, Vice Chairman. He has been a great support to us during this year, wherein we could take a lot of initiatives under the Direct Tax Committee of this ICI. And very good evening to all the participants. Once again, I welcome you all for this very important seminar, wherein you would be discussing. It's little different what we generally do. We have been discussing about tax as an auditors, as a chartered accountants, you want to always see how the tax has to be applied, how the benefit can be passed on to the your clients or your associates, or probably how you can advise. But this time it's different. You would be, of course, the learned speaker would be discussing on role of the constitutional courts. Of course, when we talk about courts, I'm talking about High Court and Supreme Court. What is their role in protecting the it says fiscal jurisdiction or fiscal justice should be done, and how a taxpayer's right can be protected, that's the most important. So please be tuned to it. I think so you should be more attentive next to you hours, and it will help you a lot, because once you know what are the rights of the taxpayer, it will help you in your general practice also. Nobody, no officers, no can question you or ask you questions which is beyond the rights of a taxpayer. I think so a lot of enlightening session it's going to happen in next 2 hours. Coming to very briefly, of course, we have been discussing on week-to-week basis on Direct Tax Committee's initiative. But in the last week, I thought I'll just update you. After our pre-budget presentation personally made to CBDT chairman on 15th of November, we have already sent another additional suggestions on pre-budget. Around 31 suggestions were sent, and that included certain suggestions which were specifically been asked by the CBDT in regard to how and this Income Tax Act 2025 can be further consolidated, or how a cross-referencing can happen in regard to the Section 393 of Income Tax Act 2025. which deals with TDS tabulation. So we have already done that, and I hope the suggestions which have been made by us will be considered positively. Very one important suggestion, of course, we had also, which has been discussed across the fraternity also. And of course, we do not know what is going to happen. It was also suggested that whether we can move towards a regime wherein a joint tax return between spouses can be allowed, taking a clue from what's happening in USA, and it can also act as a tax deterrent towards a tax avoidance, which is maybe prevailing in India to that extent. So that has been positively been considered, but I do not know when it will be actually been implemented. But when we have actually presented that, there was a very positive response from the TPL, that is tax policy legislation. As I always said, it's our duty to represent, put our thoughts, whether it is accepted or not. They may not accept today, they may not accept tomorrow, but yes, they will come and they will accept. Idea is, please put forth our thoughts. And therefore, I always request to all the members, wherever you have issues facing Income Tax Act, please do escalate to Direct Tax Committee. And I can always assure you, at cost of my reputation, myself, my vice chairman, we individually will be looking into those emails. It's not that you have sent an email and those are not been considered. It may happen that you have not been updated what has happened, but for each and every your emails has been discussed with us. If required, we also take it to the committee. And if we or the committee feels it is an appropriate representation should be made, we make a representation to the CBDT and try to make up a follow-up. Another development which I thought I should tell you is, in the pre-budget meeting also, there was a very positive statement made by the chairman of CBDT that between institute, because we are part of a government in a way, being falling under Ministry of Corporate Affairs as a regulatory body, we should not work separately. We should work in tandem. And his specific words were, let's work as a we and not I. And in fact, one of the suggestions which came from them was that why not we develop some guidelines, maybe FAQs sort of for a particular sections where a lot of litigation is happening. And if there is a concurrence of an Institute of Chartered Accountants before the issue, it is issued by the CBDT. Obviously, there may be some litigations which may be reduced, because if there is a concurrence of institute, it is presumed that majority of the members would actually implement that in their daily life, in their daily professional practice. So idea was that we have already started working on two important areas. Again, of course, the most of litigations or most of difference of opinions which are in regard to TDS, we are trying to have some compilation, some FAQs, some guidelines on that. Uh, of course, that's the most easier also. So idea is, if we are able to take off that jointly with CBDT, I think so something good can happen with this. So this was the important background. Secondly, of course, the time has come, and wherein ease of doing business has been discussed across the fraternity, across the governments. I was just reading a newspaper 2 3 days before, and Shaktikanta Das, who is now an advisor to PM's office, and he just make a mention that there will be series of measures in next 3 months in relation to ease of doing business. And obviously, as a chairman and a vice chairman, Vishnuji is also, we are aware, because we have also, in fact, been part of a group formed by Ministry of Revenue for bringing in ease of doing business as far as tax policy is concerned. And most of people who are representatives of branch would have seen that wherever our direct tax committee programs are been held, the representatives from Ministry of Revenue are being invited. They address our members for the, and we have given them a 30-minute slot. And this idea of giving them a slot was to, they wanted to do an outreach program, because this ease of doing business ranking, which has been done by World Bank, which was last done, I think so, 6 or 7 years before, wherein India could improve its ranking from 120 and odd to 60 and odd. And the government is hopeful that it would further improve it. And this ranking, which was stopped by the World Bank, will be now taken up in 2026. So all the measures around that are there. You have also read in the newspaper in regard to certain suggestions being done by Ministry of Corporate Affairs for making an amendments in the Companies Act. So all, I think so the members should be aware that a lot of changes would be coming. It could be also impacting our professional practice in the way which we are doing it. And we be tuned to it, what the changes are making. Let us have a positive impact of this ease of doing business, whatever comes in the stride. So with that request, once again, thank you very much to all the participants. Please be attentive, and special thanks to Tusharji for joining this and obliging Direct Tax Committee, I would say, by agreeing to give this session on a very important topic, which I'm sure my members would love it. Tusharji, we have not been doing such topics generally, but it's all of my brainchild of my vice chairman, who is every week he gives such a beautiful ideas, and he brings somehow he'll talk to some speakers, he'll get such a speakers rope in which otherwise the tax committee would have not done it. So thank you very much, Vishwabhai. Thank you for your efforts and keeping this weekly webinars always very interesting. Thank you. Over to you,
Thank you.
Deepika.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for sharing all the updates and your words of wisdom with us. Uh, Now, it is my honor to introduce our Vice Chairman of Direct Tax Committee, CA Vishnu Kumar Agrawal, a seasoned chartered accountant with over 2 decades of expertise in income tax, litigation, and regulatory compliances. As a current council member of ICAI and vice chairman of both the CPE committee and direct tax committee, he exemplifies dedication. His leadership role across ICAI Keys Committee, combined with his specialization in search and survey proceedings and income tax litigation, have earned him wide recognition. He is a prolific speaker and author and have been a past chairman of WRC. He has written the authoritative book Landmark Judgments of Income Tax. His commitment to social service further enhances his profile. I request Vishnu sir to please share his words of wisdom.
Thank you, Deepika ji. Respected the chairman of the Direct Tax Committee, CA Piyush Chhajer ji, our today's esteemed speaker. Whenever I call Tushar Hemani ji in last 7 to 8 years, when I was the chairman of the Western India Regional Council, first time I met with him at the Surat. And from that time to today till, whenever I call him for any of the work, for my private work, for my office work or the institute work, he never say no, always smiling face. And when 4 days before only, when I call him, तुषार जी आपको ये सब्जेक्ट लेना है एंड तुषार जी इज ready to in 1 minutes only few of the second that Vishnu bhai I will take this topic. First I was in the impression whether he will come for the webinar or not, but moment he say yes, I was very happy that Tushar ji is agreed. Friends, Tushar ji is very means how I can say express in my words for Tushar ji. He is very down to earth, very humble, very knowledgeable, senior advocate in the Gujarat High Court, and whenever he argue any case, something comes different from the others. Friends, I will not take much of the time because we all are here to hear Tushar Hemani ji. Very rarely he came. Friends, only just I update to you. Recently we have came out with our Income Tax Act 2025, new Income Tax Act with the 500 rupees only. First time Direct Tax Committee has printed this. It is available for the cell counter. All our publication, other publications are houses are selling in 2000 rupees, 2500 rupees. But as a non-profit organization, our Income Tax Act in the tabular format is available is only 500 rupees. So I request everyone, please take the maximum benefit of this Income Tax Act. Friends, this year also we have came out with our revised guidance note for 44AB, ITR forms, and so many initiatives which our already chairman has talked. So I will not repeat of that. Friends, now the time has to hear the Tushar Hemani ji. So I request Deepika ji to kindly introduce our learned speaker today. And Tushar bhai, thank you very much, sir, for accepting our invitation. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Now it's time to introduce our speaker. As already said by our chairman and vice chairman, we are privileged to have Mr. Tushar Hemani with us, a senior advocate renowned for his practice in direct and indirect taxation, corporate, commercial, and fiscal law before the Supreme Court, High Court, tribunals, and other judicial authorities. His recognition as one of the youngest senior advocate by Gujarat High Court speaks volume about his expertise and commitment. Mr. Hemani holds distinguished positions, including chairman of Direct Tax Committee of All India Federation of Tax Practitioner for 2025 and vice chairman of the ITAT Bar Association Coordination Committee for multiple terms. Besides his legal acumen, he is an editor of New Reassessment Regime Law Procedure and Practical Guide and frequent speaker and faculty member across renowned institutes. I welcome you, sir, on behalf of Direct Tax Committee. Now it's your platform to enlighten us.
Thank you, Deepika ji. Honorable Sri Piyush Chhajet, Chairman of Direct Tax Committee, Honorable Sri Vishnubhai Agrawal, Vice Chairman, Direct Tax Committee, friends who are available across the country on web platform, a very good evening to all of you. Friends, today's topic is something which is a very interesting topic. And the reason why we chose this topic and not any other technical topic was for the simple reason that there is a change of regime which is going to happen immediately after 4 months, 4.5 months. With 1st April, from 1st April, we'll be having a new Income Tax Act 2026. That is 2025 Act with effect from 1st April 2026. And therefore, a technical session probably would not be complete without building the bridge between the two. So therefore, we chose a topic which is generic in nature. And what I have also done is I have already built that bridge in my slides. You will find that wherever there is a reference to some existing statutory provision, I have put into parenthesis the statutory provision which is going to be there with effect from 1st April 2026 under the new topic this wise that even if there is a change in the language of the section, maybe some changes here and there, some grammatical changes, some say that it's nothing but old wine in the new bottle. Be that as it may, we will again learn the new act as well. But then today, for today's discussion, what I have done is whenever there is any reference to the new act to be given, I have already incorporated that into my slides. So friends, you will also find that even under the new act, this discussion would be equally relevant. And you would find that whatever that we are going to discuss in next 90 minutes probably would be helpful even while implementing the new act. And that is the reason why this topic was in the first instance chosen. Let me, yeah, I have shared the slides and yes. The topic Guardians of Fiscal Justice, the Constitutional Court's role in the safeguarding the taxpayers' right under the Income Tax Act 1961 is equally applicable to the Income Tax Act 2025. Uh, Look, in India, we have a typical structure. All of us are aware that in India, we have a constitution, which is a written constitution. A written constitution, again, friends, believe me, again, I'm not a scholar who can claim that I have read the constitution across jurisdiction and compared them. But whenever we talk to such scholars, they always come up by saying that India has one of the best constitution. And those who practice tax laws, they have to make themselves well versed with the constitution, because ultimately the taxation laws and constitution, they always go hands in hands. Those who are good with taxation, they are always good with the constitutional laws, and vice versa. Because in order to understand the nitty-gritties of tax laws, in order to understand and appreciate how taxes can be levied, one has to read the constitution very minutely. And probably that is the reason why some of the best constitutional lawyers that India has witnessed, right from Nani Palkhiwala to Pola and now in the present generation, probably Salve, all of them have practiced taxation laws. And that is the reason why both of them are to be read together so as to understand that how the power to tax a citizen flows from constitution and ultimately culminates into income tax act. Today's discussion, again, we will not be discussing general constitutional law. Our discussion is restricted and focused only on the tax laws, and then in juxtaposition, what are the constitutional provisions and how the constitutional courts. What I mean by constitutional courts is high courts and supreme courts, because they are considered as a constitutional courts. All other lower judiciary, etc., is not a constitutional court. Therefore, we will be focusing more on the role of a constitutional court in so far as implementation of Income Tax Act is concerned, and nothing beyond that. I will start with this famous observation, and that observation, this is something which is closer to my heart because it has come in the Indian context, though American jurist has said it way back in 1927. In the Indian context, it was said none other than Justice H.R. Khanna. Hansraj Khanna is again one of those few judges who I would say that I'm a big fan of Justice Khanna. And those who do not know the story of Justice Khanna, let me only very briefly deviate and tell the story of Justice Khanna. Justice Khanna was part of the landmark judgment of ADM Jabalpur. ADM Jabalpur was a judgment where the question as regards the suspension of the fundamental rights during Indian emergency. This was 1975 to 77. We had emergency which was declared by the central government. And during emergencies, whether the fundamental rights can be suspended or not, that was a question which fell for the consideration of Supreme Court. A constitution bench, CB, was constituted. There were 5 judges: Justice A.N. Ray, Justice Beg, Justice Chandrachud, Justice Bhagwati, P.N. Bhagwati, and Justice Khanna. And the question was that whether these fundamental rights which are there, whether they can also be suspended during the course of emergency, which is declared by the central government for any reason. That reason which was given was national security. And Justice Khanna was the only dissenting voice. And when he wrote that judgment, in fact, Justice Khanna, when he wrote that judgment, he very well knew that if he take a dissenting voice, if he pen a dissenting judgment, probably he will not be considered for the post of his promotion. He was the number 2 judge at the relevant point in time. And he knew that if he sticks to his ideology, his principles, it is going to cost him the chair of Chief Justice. But then Justice Khanna was Justice Khanna. Ultimately, he penned a dissenting voice. He said that the fundamental rights, which are Article 21, protection of life and personal liberty, they precede the Constitution. And even if the constitutional rights are suspended, the suspension of the fundamental rights are not justified, and no government can suspend these rights. And that was the man of conviction, that for his personal view, he sacrificed the chair of Chief Justice of India. And that is the reason why I said that Justice Khanna is very close to me. He said that taxes are the price that we pay for civilization, and very rightly so. That every day we pay taxes, otherwise, whatever the pinching is, many a times people feel a lot of pinch when they have to part with the taxes, etc. But ultimately, it's nothing but our contribution in building the nation. And therefore, this is a price that we pay for civilization. This is the price that we pay for the present India. Uh, then comes, as I said earlier, that taxes is not automatic. That their taxes are not something which are levied just as it is. Taxes can only be levied with the authority of law. And therefore, Article 265 is something where the whole game starts. That no taxes shall be levied or collected except by authority of law. Now, this is of a fundamental importance, because unless there is an authority to levy and to collect, no taxes can be at appropriate time. I'll give an example as to what does it mean by authority to levy, authority to collect. But for the time being, let us move forward and go and see the other provisions of the Constitution. For the purpose of levy, there are 4 important components, and those 4 important components are subject of tax, the person liable to tax, rate of taxation, and measure or value on which the rate is to be applied. So the subject of tax is a citizen in case of an individual, and then the subject of tax is probably his income. That income is something which is on revenue account. Maybe under the Income Tax Act, even the capital account income also is taxable under certain circumstances. The person is an individual. The rate of taxation is something which is decided by the annual budgets. Every year we see what is the rate of taxation, and the measure or value on which rate is to be applied is the quantum of income. So income quantification process again is defined under the various provisions of the Act, and therefore these are the four important components. Again, in the context of direct tax, we have to read Article 246, read with 7th schedule, where the union list is there. All of us are aware that Article 246 again divides the levy of taxation amongst union and states. And then we have a concurrent list where both can levy the taxes. So for the time being, we are concerned with the union list, where entry 82 is with respect to the taxes, namely the direct taxes. We have definition of taxation and tax on income under Article 366 of the Constitution of India. Taxation includes imposition of any tax or impost, whether general or local or special, and tax shall be construed accordingly. So, therefore, the definition of tax again is something which is not very categorical in terms of what is called a tax. And that is the reason why court had to define that tax are the price that we pay for civilization. And the taxes on income includes a tax in the nature of an excess profit tax. So what comes out is that tax on income has something to do with profit. And therefore, we all know that ultimately the tax is always on income and not on the gross receipts. So this is the foundation for that principle. The taxes are always on the income and not on the gross receipts, because it is a tax on profits and not my turnover. Turnover tax is probably taken care of by indirect taxes. Now, coming to the role of the Constitutional Court, we see that in India, again, unlike some other Western jurisdictions where the Constitutional Court is different than an appellate court, we have here an amalgam of both. The Constitutional Courts, the very same courtroom, the very same judges, they work in a dual capacity. One as an appellate court, namely where the appeals, etc., lie, and they deal with the appeals as a third appeal or fourth appeal as the scheme of the act may be. And then their role also extends to constitutional capacity, and that is in terms of protecting the rights of the taxpayers. Various rights, will be again discussing them. So therefore, this is a dual court. It's not a court where only constitutionality can be challenged or only appeal can be filed. It's a dual court, and the same court works in dual capacity. Insofar as income tax is concerned, we have the court, namely the High Court, because ultimately even the Supreme Court also Section 261 is there. But then for the purpose of understanding the appellate court's role, our focus would be mainly on the High Courts. And that High Court, Section 260 capital A of the Income Tax Act, it provides for an appeal against the order of the ITAT on substantial question of law. Why substantial question of law? Because ultimately there has to be a filtration. Under the scheme of the Income Tax Act, you have a problem. You file the return of income, and then the return of income is taken under a scrutiny assessment. The assessing officer would say that no, sir, your income is not 100, it is 120. For the purpose of making addition of this rupees 20, there would be involvement of various facts, there will be involvement of various law on the issue. And therefore, that addition can be challenged before the first appellate authority on both the counts, on facts as well as in law, whereby given a choice, I can adduce additional evidences, I can argue on facts, I can cite legal judgments. Commissioner Appeal would decide the issue considering both facts as well as the law. I take the matter further before ITAT, Income Tax Appellate Tribunal. ITAT again would decide the issue considering both the factual aspect as well as the legal aspect and render a decision. Now, ITAT is a final fact-finding authority. So the journey of facts would terminate with the judgment of ITAT. Once we have the judgment order of the ITAT, the factual aspects are put an end to, they are rested over there. What goes further from the order of the tribunal is a substantial question of law. So, what is taken before the High Court is not something which is fundamentally factual in nature. What is taken before the High Court is a substantial question of law. And what is substantial question of law? Substantial question of law, again, is a term which is not defined neither under the Income Tax Act nor under the Constitution. Under the Civil Procedure Code, also, more or less identical provisions are there under Section 100 of the old Act. That the substantial question of law, what is a substantial question of law? Because ultimately, if facts are not to be disturbed, facts are to be accepted the way they are after the judgment of the ITED, how a substantial question of law can be decided? Courts have laid down in a series of judgment. This one, the Sir Chunilal Mehta's judgment, AIR 1962, Supreme Court 1314, is a constitutional bench judgment, and it's a guiding light on the issues as regards what is a substantial question of law. So, a substantial question of law is something which affects the general public. It has a general public importance. It affects the rights of the parties as well. It should not be a question which is directly answered by courts in an earlier judgment. So it should be an open question. So if a question is already answered by Supreme Court, then High Court would not entertain that and not treat the same as a substantial question of law, because that question already stands answered. That question again is something where, if there is no direct judgment, or if there are alternate views which are possible, maybe some issue court might say that, sir, this is covered. We might say that, no, sir, this has never been examined from the angle from which I want to project before you, and therefore kindly entertain this question. Take an example of opportunity of cross examination. Supposing there is some statement, examination in chief, the statement is recorded where someone gives a damaging statement. Someone would say, entry operator would say that, sir, I'm in the business of giving entries, and those who have dealt with me have entered into a fictitious transaction. None of those transactions are genuine. Now, that question is a general question. My name does not appear, admittedly, nor there is any material. However, by going by the banking statements, it is established that I entered into a transaction with that particular entry operator. I ask for an opportunity to cross-examine that person. Now, cross-examination of that person is something which is a fundamental or a legal right which is given to me under the Income Tax Act. It is again, it goes to the very root of the matter. It is recognized by the court that in case if you want to use any material against an SSC, you must give an opportunity, and therefore that the entry operator is required to be produced for cross verification. I demand that cross verification may be granted. However, that demand was not coming out categorically in terms of writing a letter to the assessing officer, and therefore that demand is rejected. Before the commissioner appeals, I write a specific letter saying that, sir, I want an opportunity to cross examine. Tribunal says that because before AOU did not ask for cross, therefore you have lost the opportunity to examine that person. I go before the High Court. Now, the substantial question of law is that whether without cross examination a statement can be relied upon or not. Again, directly answered by series of judgment, including Supreme Court, that no statement can be used against an affected person unless opportunity of cross examination is given. And therefore, the issue is pure and simple. Revenue would then argue that, sir, what about the demand for cross examination? And therefore, there is an alternate view that is there a class of SSCs would stand on a different footing as compared to someone who has asked for, who has demanded cross examination, as against someone who has never asked for cross examination. And therefore, this is an alternate view, a view where the revenue would suggest that, sir, you do not entertain this question, or do not answer the question in favor of the SSC. And then SSCs would argue that, sir, I raise a specific demand before Commissioner Appeals, and the law is to the effect that Commissioner Appeals have all the powers which are available with the assessing officer and much more than that. And therefore, he could have exercised the powers of an assessing authority and granted me the opportunity to cross-examine. So this is a variation from that settled law, and therefore alternative views, if alternative views are possible, then even under such a circumstances, a question of law could arise, and that question of law would be treated or tagged as a substantial question of law. Again, quote in 2001 3 SCC 179 in the context of general law has pointed out what is a substantial question of law. Substantial question of law, the court said that it must not be settled by the law of the land or by some binding precedent. So if a Gujarat High Court or a Bombay High Court has already answered the question, and in the before the very same High Court, I would say go and say that, sir, this question is though answered, but I again want to argue, then court would say that no, sir, this is already answered, therefore there is no substantial question of law. However, if a non-jurisdictional High Court has already answered the question, Supreme Court is yet to decide the issue, and a jurisdictional High Court might entertain that question as a question of law because there is no view of the jurisdictional High Court which is available, and therefore, in order to have a view of the jurisdictional High Court, court might entertain that as a substantial question of law. What is ultimately the finding of the court is that there has to be a judicious balance between the indispensable obligation to do justice at all the stages and impelling necessity of avoiding prolongation of the life of a lease. Lease is a pending matter. So justice and unnecessary admission of substantial question of law, they are both to be weighted against each other, and whatever prevails in a given situation must give way to the other. Again, Supreme Court has then deviated. This was both the earlier judgments were on the question as regards the question of law. However, Supreme Court has also said that there are certain situations where even a question of fact would also become a question of law. And what are those situations? The situations are that some material which is already placed ignored by the court. Supposing in a cash credit matter, if at all you have repaid the loan, the details are available, ledger account there, bank statement there, repayment details are available, ignored by court, again perversity, question of law. Courts have drawn wrong inference from the facts. The facts which are available, again, they are not applied correctly. Courts have drawn wrong inferences based on those facts. Courts have wrongly cast the burden on the SSC when the burden was not on the SSC to establish a particular thing. And therefore, these are all the situations which would give rise to, as we popularly call it, perversity. A perverse order, maybe on the factual premise, but then a perverse order also gives rise to a question of law, which can be in a given situation considered as a substantial question of law. And therefore, a finding of fact, irrelevant consideration, hyper-technical view, something which is placed, not considered, something which is not placed, demanded, all those factual inaccuracies, if they can be demonstrated before the court that they are perverse in nature, then again they would give rise to a substantial question of law, and court must answer those questions based on the facts which are then presented before the court in the correct perspective. Now, this was insofar as appellate role is concerned. Again, section 261, Supreme Court, we have the same procedure. If High Court grants you a certificate of fitness while passing order under section 260 capital A, you straightway go before the Supreme Court as an appellant. And under the Income Tax Act itself, there is a provision, section 261, which would take you there in a role of an appellant. And that is insofar as the function of the Constitutional Court as an appellate authority. But today we are again, the focus is more on constitutional role rather than an appellate role. And therefore we'll be spending more time on constitutional role of the Constitutional Court. Constitutional role, again, insofar as High Court is concerned, it flows from Article 226 predominantly. In some cases, Article 227. 226 is basically a very wide section where the whole idea is that you file a writ petition before the court for enforcement of your fundamental rights or any other legal right. Look, appreciate that 226 in juxtaposition to Article 32. Article 32 also more or less has the same flavor. You can approach the Constitutional Court by filing a writ petition directly Supreme Court, Article 32, High Court, Article 226. But the fundamental difference is Article 32 is only for enforcement of fundamental right under Chapter 3 of the Constitution. There, the word which is that any other purpose, Article 226 ends with for the protection of fundamental right and for any other purpose is missing. So any other purpose which is there under 226 gives High Court the widest possible jurisdiction. Any hint of injustice, you go before the High Court, and we will see how the principles of filing a writ petition, etc., are governed. But subject to crossing all those hurdles, anything which can be challenged before a constitutional court can be challenged before a High Court under Article 226. It's in probably one of the wonders of the Constitution, where a citizen can approach knocks the door of a High Court and get a justice on any issue which is troubling him, and that would include all kinds of writs, etc. We all know that by and large, the writ petitions are filed before the High Court. We are not concerned with habeas corpus. We are concerned with mandamus, certiorari, or maybe in some cases prohibition. Then this is insofar as fundamental rights are concerned. Insofar as tax laws are concerned, what are those fundamental rights? Again, we will check a little while from now. It applies to, we can file the writ petition against a public or a state, public authorities or the state or an authority which is acting as a public authority, technically may not be even a public authority or a state within the meaning of Article 12 of the Constitution. Territorial, again, it's a very interesting area where a lot of litigation are taking place today, that what would be the territorial jurisdiction of a High Court? Because Article 226 subclause 2 says that even a part cause of action, if it is arising, then the High Court concerned will have the jurisdiction. So take an example that someone is there in Mumbai, the citizen is in Mumbai, residing in Mumbai. He is earlier he was filing the returns of income in the Calcutta, that is state of West Bengal, and thereafter he has moved to Bombay. Now, for the years for which he was filing the returns of income before the West Bengal authorities, assessing officer from West Bengal issues a reopening notice asking him to file the return of income for that year, because according to him, that was the year when he was assessed in Calcutta, and therefore the assessing authority has the jurisdiction. Now we want to challenge that writ petition because now I am residing in Mumbai. I don't want to go back to Calcutta and file a writ petition there, and every time there is a hearing, I don't want to trouble myself. Therefore, I want to approach the Bombay High Court. And therefore, the question that whether Bombay High Court will have the territorial jurisdiction to prevent or prohibit the Calcutta authority, the Calcutta assessing officer, in going ahead with the notice and eventually cause the notice if it is found to be without jurisdiction. 226(2) would come to the rescue of the taxpayer or the citizen at that point in time, because citizen is normally residing in the state of Maharashtra, in Mumbai more particularly, and because of that, a part cause of action is a Mumbai citizen is now visited with a reopening notice under 148. Therefore, that cause of action is affecting a citizen of Mumbai. A citizen of Mumbai, I'm consciously using that term. We are all citizens of India, but for the purpose of understanding this, a citizen of Mumbai receives that notice, and that notice, High Court will have the territorial jurisdiction because the person concerned, the affected party, is there in Maharashtra. So even if the authority is out of Maharashtra, Mumbai High Court can still exercise the jurisdiction, and that is the scope of territorial jurisdiction. These are all discretionary remedy. Again, we will see in a greater detail shortly from now. And we are again, the writ should not be in the nature of administrative or supervisory function. Article 226 again is a power of superintendence over the various courts, tribunal, again functioning in this particular state. And if they are not properly functioning, one can file a petition. Supposing a ITET is not functioning properly or a commissioner appeals. We had a curious case sometime back in the state of Gujarat itself, when a particular commissioner appeals would come to the office at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and he would come drunk to the office, and some vigilant citizens, they filed the writ petition before the High Court under Article 227 that the appellate authority is not properly functioning, and because he is discharging judicial function, he will be falling under the superintendent of the High Court, and therefore Article 226 under such a circumstances is permissible. So various courts, quasi-judicial authority, if they are not functioning properly, Article 226 can come to the rescue. And therefore, we come to the fundamental aspect, or the highlight of today's discussion, that is constitutional role of the court and the taxation. Now, when can we directly approach a constitutional court, whether for the purpose of enforcing a fundamental right, for the purpose of breach of principles of natural justice, or when we believe that the whole proceeding is without jurisdiction, or we want to challenge a particular section, notification, a particular rule, or any bylaws, uh, as an ultra virus and against the scheme of the constitution, or we want to highlight the fact that the particular authority is not working properly, or there is a huge backlog. Take an example today, that the appellate authority, first appellate authority, many citizens feel that they are not discharging their duty very efficiently, and because of that there is a huge pendency. More than 5 lakhs, 6 lakhs appeals are pending before the first appellate authority, and therefore we want a direction from the court and its supervisory role, that you start disposing of x number of matters per appeal station, or in case if that is not sufficient, increase the number of appellate authorities. All those things can be taken in a writ petition, and we can approach the High Court under various constitutional provisions. Take an example of extension of a due date, which is prescribed by CBDT, that we believe that that due date is something which is unreasonable. You are kind of troubling the citizens. You are putting unnecessary pressure on the citizens in meeting with a deadline which is unrealistic in its nature, and therefore the time which is granted to compile the data, to prepare the return, file it, or to prepare the tax audit report, file it, is unreasonably very less. We can ask the court to extend that time. And therefore, let us bifurcate all these roles of the courts under various heads and try to understand them in a very systematic manner. So, what can be challenged? There are 4 broad categories where the challenge can take place. The first and the foremost is virus of a statutory provision, rule, circular, or notification. If I want to challenge any statutory provision, any rule, any circular, any notification, it is otherwise binding on me. We have a judgment of Navnit Lal Javeri and all other following judgments. The view that is taken is that circulars and notifications are not binding on the SSE. And therefore, unless that circular or notification is something which is creating a situation where, unless you challenge that, you cannot get relief, one can always argue that they are not binding on me, but they are binding on the department. And therefore, unless a circular is challenged, departmental authority will not grant you any relief. So, challenge to the circulars, challenge to a statutory provision. I'll give you some examples of why, how, and what manner statutory provision can be challenged, a rule can be challenged. Then comes the orders against which there is no appeal which is provided. So there are large number of orders under Income Tax Act where appeal provisions are not there. And once appeal provisions are not there, you have no option but to challenge it by way of a writ petition. Any action, inaction, order, direction, notice that is issued without jurisdiction, illegal, and or against the express provisions of the law. So without jurisdiction, how it is without jurisdiction, illegal, how illegal. Let me give you a few examples here before I take you to the formal discussion on each of these issues. Without jurisdiction, so something is, supposing a reopening notice is without jurisdiction because the time limit which is prescribed under section 149 is already over, and something which is done, a matter involving escapement, alleged escapement of less than 50 lakhs rupees being reopened beyond a period of 3 years, they completely without jurisdiction. Illegal, something which is done is against the express provision of law, or something which is illegal. So a 154 order is sought to be passed after a period of 10 years, something which is illegal, completely barred by limitation, and that is against the express provisions of the law, and therefore something which can be challenged before the court of law. Any action or inaction, order, direction, notice that is in breach of principles of natural justice. So anything which is in breach of principles of natural justice, you can straightaway challenge it before the court. Now again, supposing someone has given you a notice asking you to file the response within 12 hours, not a very welcoming environment where you are supposed to reply within a period of 12 hours, not possible. Or before the next date of hearing, order is passed in between. Or a show cause notice relying on large number of things, but without even providing you any of those relied upon documents or evidences or material. So these are all the facets of natural justice. And again, once you find that something is in violation of natural justice, obviously we can rush to the court. Any action or inaction in maintaining the rule of law. Um, Inaction. I file repeated reminders. I want my refund. Nobody is granting me the refund. CPC is simply not passing any order. Every time I generate 154, a simple message comes after 2 days that your 154 is without any merits and therefore rejected. So my refund is withheld for no rhyme and reason. There are no reasons which are coming forward that for X reason we are withholding your refund or we are not granting you the refund. That is inaction on the part of the authority. We can challenge it. So constitutional validity of a provision and amendments thereof. Again, competence to tax, Article 265, we have already gone through that. Article 246, List 1, Entry 82. And then what are the touchstone of challenge? How do we challenge the constitutionality of a provision? Simply going before the court and saying that, sir, these are the provisions which according to me are unconstitutional. Even many people believe that even the levy of tax is unconstitutional, because why should we pay taxes? That what are those touchstones based on which the legal jurisprudence have developed over a period of time? So one is fundamental rights. So fundamental right under Article 14, right to equality. If you find that the treatment is not very equally dished out to various taxpayers, you can challenge that on the ground of inequality. If it is arbitrary, unreasonable, manifestly arbitrary, confiscatory, your right to carry on the business or profession is unnecessarily curtailed by unrealistic restrictions on your business or trade or occupation. So these are all the facets of Article 14, 19 and Article 19.6 that state has every right to put restrictions so long as the restrictions are reasonable. Then penalty or high rate of taxes, which are almost in the nature of penalty. Article 20 can come to your rescue. Retrospectivity is one facet where one can challenge that you cannot levy taxes retrospectively. If I enter the transaction today, I must be told that what is the rate on 1st of April of that assessment year itself, that this is going to be the rate. I enter into the transaction and 5 years down the road, someone cannot change that rate of tax and say that, no, sir, you wrongly paid taxes at the rate of 30%. Now we believe that it should be at the rate of 40%. Therefore, you pay the difference. Otherwise, we will issue the notice along with interest and penalty. And then comes the facet of the constitutional interpretation of a provision is reading down the provision. So, if there is a choice available to the court that to declare a provision as unconstitutional and to read it down so as to make it workable, then probably court would decide or choose the later option, that we read down the provision so as to make it workable as against declaring the provision as completely unconstitutional or ultra virus. Article 226, 32 we have already discussed. Now, what are these facets of Article 14? We start with Article 14, equality. So what is that concept of equality? Let me give you an example. This is a reported judgment, 348 ITR 391. Those who started practice in maybe around 15-20 years back, they would realize that there was a highly litigious section, namely 80 HHC, a nightmare for SSEs and probably a sweet dream for practitioners, because every SSE who is claiming 80 HHC must go into appeal. He will have some dispute with the department and professionals would be happy that, sir, you are claiming 80 HHC, you are going to be my next client. This was a section which we gave rise to huge amount of litigation, because ultimately what the whole idea was that you export whatever income that you generate, your income would be held tax free. Again, that provision came to an end sometime in 2002-3. There was a sunset clause and that provision, the deduction was withdrawn by the government. In 2005, after the sunset clause, government came out with a retrospective amendment pointing out that we will treat two categories of taxpayers. One, having an export turnover up to 10 crore. Second category, those exporters having a turnover of more than 10 crore. And we will treat both of them separately. Now, without giving any reason why up to 10 crore one category, why beyond 10 crore second category, government came out with a law, and that law was challenged amongst other grounds apart from the retrospectivity and all other grounds. Also on the ground that this is not an equal treatment given to both sets of SSEs. And Gujarat High Court and later on confirmed by the Supreme Court said that yes, there is no distinction there. How, on what basis you are having a discriminatory treatment between an SSE having a turnover of up to 10 crore and turnover beyond 10 crore. Look, it is not that everyone must be treated equally. The fundamental of our taxation system is slab-based tax rates. So based on the slabs, you are already divided amongst various classes. Up to 5 lakhs of income, lesser tax. Up to above 1 crore, a huge tax liability along with the surcharge. And if you go above 5 crore, probably more surcharge. So therefore, that intelligible differentia is a term which is intelligible differentia is something which is based on some rational, intelligent basis. Those criteria are certainly permissible. So classification based on some criteria, which is known as intelligible differentia, is permissible. But then the parliament must give reasons that why we want to treat both these classes of SSEs differently. In this case, there was no such reason which was given, and therefore court struck down the law as unconstitutional and ultra virus on the ground that up to 10 crore and above 10 crore, the classification is unequal and it violates the foundation of Article 14. So this is insofar as equality is concerned. Take an example of arbitrary and manifestly arbitrary. What is an arbitrary law or what is manifestly arbitrary law? Is there any difference? Arbitrary is something which is on the face of it not workable. Manifestly arbitrary is something which is absurd in the sense. It is a higher degree of arbitrariness. The classic example is again the judgment of the Supreme Court in the case of Pepsi Foods. There was this provision under the Income Tax Act 254 2A. Now 254 relates to power of the tribunal how to grant stay. 2A more particularly is that a tribunal can grant a stay up to initially for a period of 180 days and then it can be extended up to a period of further 180 days. However, once these 360 days are over, then the power of extension of the stay is not available with the tribunal, and the law says that irrespective of the fact whether SSE is at fault or not at fault, anything stay beyond 360 days is not to be granted under any circumstances. That law came to be challenged. That, sir, at some places benches are not functioning. Tribunal benches are not there. So for 360 days, bench is not available. And then my stay gets automatically vacated. I am vulnerable. Department will come, attach my bank account, etc., and then recover the money, and I'll die a civil death. Some cases, even if the SSEs are ready, department would ask for time. They would say that, sir, we are not prepared. And because of no fault of SSEs, department would gain by their inaction, by asking for time. Supreme Court said that nothing doing. This is a manifestly arbitrary provision. You cannot have a provision which does not consider the ground reality. And if you have a provision which is which does not consider the ground reality, and if the SSEs have not asked for time, despite that you limit the operation of the stay for up to 360 days, then this is manifestly arbitrary, it is discriminatory, and therefore it is required to be struck down. Having said that, Supreme Court also said that, sir, if we strike down the provision, then probably the section 2A would go out of the statute book. If 2A goes, then again the power to grant stay, etc., would also go. And therefore, Supreme Court said that we read down the section. We will take out the words which says that for no fault of SSE. So if there is a fault of SSE, this provision stays. If there is no fault of SSE insofar as extension of stay beyond 360 days, then the provision is treated as ultra virus. So both the provisions, namely manifestly arbitrary and reading down, were explained by the judgment of Pepsi Foods. Confiscatory. I'll give you an example. What is confiscatory? A provision is considered as a confiscatory, which has the flavor of confiscating the entire income rather than taxing the income. So take an example of 115 BBE. 115 BBE, in a way, it has a flavor of a confiscatory provision. You have 68 edition. Supposing someone deposits some money into your bank account on account of sales. Now, government believes that that sale, though it is shown as sales, it is nothing but cash credit. Therefore, they'll add the amount in your books as a cash credit. Section 68, read with 115 BBE, you are exposed to 60% base rate, then 15% surcharge, that is 25% of 60%, that is 75%. Then you add cess and surcharge to that, 77%. Then 10% penalty, 271 AAC. So 80 to 83%, that is 10% of 60%, is 6% added to that. So roughly you are reaching 83%. And supposing if there is a delay of 2 to 3 years, or there is a gap between the assessment year in question and the assessment order being framed, then you immediately cross 100%. So effectively, what government is doing is they are taking away the entire income in the guise of tax. So if the entire income is confiscated by the government, it has a flavor of confiscatory power. And Supreme Court way back in 1963 said that you cannot have a machinery or a tax mechanism which is confiscatory in nature. Taxes are always part of the income and not the whole income. Then right to practice, that is your reasonable restrictions. So in case if a particular trade or a profession has restrictions which are unrealistic in nature, you are supposed to carry out some act which is not at all reasonable insofar as the purpose which is sought to be achieved is concerned, then those are not a reasonable restriction. And even on that score also, you can challenge that, sir, this way I cannot carry on my business. If you do not allow me to carry on the business freely, where is a question of earning and paying taxes. Penalty and high rate of tax. In the nature of penalty, again, you are levying a penalty. This is the classic example is Section 23A of 2022 Act, wherein the company was expected to distribute all its surpluses by way of dividend, and dividend was taxable at an exorbitant rate. So there, Supreme Court said that this is something which is not at all a tax; it is a penalty, and penalty cannot be levied for earning income. It can only be levied for violating a particular provision of an income. Retrospectivity, again, Supreme Court has, this is a constitution bench judgment, Vatika Township, 367 ITR 466, wherein the law is settled that you cannot have a retrospective provision. This was in the context of Section 113, a surcharge provision for block assessments. It came with effect from 1/6/2002. However, block assessment scheme came with effect from 1/7/1995. Now, in between assessment years, which were the searches taking place prior to 1/6/2002, however, the assessments being framed post 1/6/2002, the assessing authority started levying this interest, this surcharge on the ground that after 1/6/2002, we have the right license to levy the surcharge. Supreme Court said that it cannot apply retrospectively. You can only levy prospectively, and that too with effect from 1/6/2002. Reading down, we have already understood the concept while discussing Pepsi. So then how does court would view it? Is there any basic fundamental guiding lights for the purpose of courts to entertain this kind of challenges to the fiscal statute? Then there are basically three presumptions. One is insofar as fiscal statutes are concerned, the parliament has a greater latitude, and therefore courts would be extremely reluctant compared to a civil right. Fiscal statutes, parliament will get a larger amount of leeway. Therefore, the courts would be extremely reluctant. You would not find in the last more than 5 to 6 decades, you would hardly come across few judgments where the law is declared unconstitutional. And therefore, the presumption is that Parliament has a greater leeway insofar as fiscal statutes are concerned. Again, the presumption is in favor of the constitutionality and not against the constitutionality. So, if I file a petition, I'll have to demonstrate before the court that, sir, the provision is not constitutional, and then the government would be called upon to reply against that particular submission. And if two views are possible, if there are two hypotheses that one is in favor of constitutionality and again one is against the constitutionality, then court would always lean in favor of the constitutionality. As against under the normal income tax laws, where there are two views whether to tax or not to tax, court would always prefer that not to tax, because there the view in favor of the SSE is to be preferred. However, when it comes to constitutionality, the view is that the provisions are constitutionally valid, and if other view is possible, then probably court would not be persuaded to take that view. I mentioned that there are large number of orders which are not available, and there one can always approach the High Court. I have narrated some of these orders. Section 119 order, you want to file a return of income because you want to claim 115 BAA, Form 10 IC, etc. is required to be filed in time under Section 139(1). You miss the deadline, you have reasonable cause, but appellate authorities are helpless because the law says that you have to file the return in time. If you don't, then you don't get the claim. You approach CBDT under 119 under the ground of genuine hardship. Now, genuine hardship, again, CBDT more often than not, they will say that there is no genuine hardship, and therefore that rejection order can be challenged before the High Court. Under the 2025 Act, it is Section 239. So that is one order against which admittedly there is no appeal, because they, under the scheme of the Act, CBDT is supposed to be the supreme authority. And if supreme authority has already rejected your claim, you can't file an appeal before either the commissioner or before the tribunal as well. So therefore, 119 is one order. 127 order, where transfers are there. You believe that you're transferred, your case is transferred unnecessarily to some other jurisdiction without giving you an opportunity of hearing, or without providing you the platform to express your grievances, you approach the High Court. It happens more often in search cases and survey cases where centralization takes place. In many a times, from far away places, people are centralized at another corner of the country, and there people get offended because sometimes individuals are there who do not have any offices across the country, or they do not have the manpower or administrative capacity to go and appear before the assessing officer in a far away corner of a country. 132, validity of the search. Again, validity of the search is one interesting issue. Probably, if time permits, we will also discuss at a later stage. 132B, your ornaments, your cash. You are going to Delhi, from Mumbai to Delhi, and you are carrying a cash of 10 lakhs of rupees. CIFS officer would say that, sir, where is the receipt for this 10 lakhs? You do not have it. He calls the assessing authority, hands over the cash under Section 132A. You file an application pointing out that, sir, these are my cash withdrawn from the bank account and I have this receipts, etc. Despite that, it doesn't do anything. You file a petition before the High Court and get your asset released. That is 132B. 132.3, prohibitory order. Again, whether it is legal, illegal, you can straight away challenge it. 132.9B, provisional attachment. Again, it comes with a time frame and it is only for a particular purpose. If that purpose is already over, the attachment has to go. If it doesn't, then you approach the court. A special audit 142.2A is one order which is not challengeable under the normal circumstances. Therefore, you challenge the validity of the special audit. You may say that, sir, my accounts are straight and simple. I do not need a special audit. The whole purpose of special audit is to extend the due date of framing the assessment. And he wanted additional time and therefore reference for a special audit. Then 148 notice, 148 AD order, again no appeals, therefore you can straightaway challenge. We again go into a little detail on this probably at a later stage. 179, liability of a director of a private limited company. If it is done without giving you an opportunity, again you can challenge it because there is no appeal which is provided. Or if 179 actions are initiated without exhausting the actions against the company in question, again, you can challenge that order before the High Court. 220 order, that is order rejecting your stay of demand. If the authority does not give any reason or the order is not judicial, then probably you can challenge that order before the High Court on the ground that, sir, I am otherwise entitled for stay and stay is not granted to me. Prohibitory order, that is 226(3) recovery order. Um, your bank, one fine day you find that after passing the assessment order on 31st day, once the time period for filing first appeal is over, on 31st day all your bank accounts are attached, all your debtors are put under garnishee order under 226(3), and your business has come to a standstill. You immediately approach the high court and point out that, sir, this is something which is not permissible. I must be given some breathing time, or the idea is to extract taxes and not to kill me, and High Court might entertain your petition. 264 revision order. Your You file a wrong income tax return offering some income which is otherwise not taxable. You want to revise that, you do not have chance to go before CBDT, then you can file a revision application before commissioner. Commissioner, if it does not give you justice, then probably you can approach the High Court. 279, that is order sanctioning the prosecution. Again, here also the commissioner must show the application of mind. If it doesn't, then that 279 order sanctioning, mechanically sanctioning the prosecution is not valid. Provisional attachment order 281B, whether provisional attachment order is justified in the facts of a present case, if whether the commissioner has reason to believe that in order to protect the interest of the revenue, the actions are justified. Then again, various schemes, VSV and income disclosure scheme, your application is wrongly rejected or not properly processed. All these orders can be challenged by way of filing a writ petition, because these are the orders against which admittedly there is no appellate provision. All of us are aware that appeal is again a creature of a statute. So unless a particular order is appealable or it is expressly stated that you can file an appeal against this order, that order would become final. And the only remedy available to you is by way of a writ petition, you can challenge the findings of those orders. The third aspect is, if you are challenging a jurisdiction, then you can file a writ petition where again 4 facets: authority of law, territorial jurisdiction, limitation, and whether the assessing officer is a correct assessing officer or not. I give you an example of Bombay versus Calcutta. If I can demonstrate that I have already preferred a, a letter, I've already written a letter to the authority pointing out that my assessment files may be transferred to Mumbai. If it is registered, my PAN data is already showing me as a Mumbai resident, then the Kolkata officer is no longer your assessing officer. And therefore, on that score also, he could not have issued the notice as discussed earlier. Limitation is again one facet, which is if it is not available, it would render the whole thing without jurisdiction. Territorial jurisdiction is something where income tax is again under section 120 read with 124, various territories are there and authority cannot act beyond the territory. So again, if that is violation of territorial jurisdiction, you can straightway challenge it. Authority of law, I have already discussed. Then comes the next aspect. Earlier we discussed various orders and or notices which are uh, passed. There is no appeal provision. However, there are some notices, including 148 notices, where admittedly there is no appeal against the notice. However, the fundamental argument is that can I, at a drop of a hat, can I go before the High Court and say that, sir, a notice is issued to me, kindly protect me? Because admittedly, yes, I agree that against the notice, there is no appeal. But High Court would say that, sir, against the notice, why do we show indulgence? Because you have to reply to that notice. You give the information. Ultimately, if you are innocent, nothing will happen to you. If you are not innocent, then we would not like to hamper the investigation at this stage. Kindly appreciate it from a revenues point of view. They want to inquire whether you have entered into a particular transaction or not. Your case is that, sir, I do not even know that person. Therefore, question of entering into transaction would not arise. Therefore, you are asking me wrong questions without jurisdiction. I go before the court. That, sir, he is not listening to me. Now, court is not going to decide whether you know that person, you have transactions with that person, because these are all The inquiries, investigations, which are again falling in the factual arena. Court, as a constitutional court, High Court or Supreme Court, will not decide whether the factually you are right or wrong. And therefore, all these notices, notice under 148, 143.2, 153C, 154, 179, 263 or 271 1C or equivalent provision, the court would be extremely reluctant. But having said that, if I can demonstrate, let's say 148 notice, ex facie barred by limitation, not at all falling within the prescribed guidelines for reopening, can certainly be challenged day in and day out, court would entertain. 143.2 notice. 143.2 notice is basically it's a intimation for assumption of jurisdiction to carry out an assessment where the revenue proposes to disturb your return income and find out what is going to be your assessed income. However, 143.2 notice is issued in the name of an erstwhile entity. Your company has already amalgamated. The 143.2 notice is issued in the name of amalgamating company, which is no longer in existence. What is in existence today is amalgamated company. So whether that is permissible, I can straightway challenge that, sir, this notice is itself is illegal. Now the time to issue a fresh notice is also over, and therefore the whole assessment proceedings are bad in law. It's a different matter. They would immediately reopen it on some ground, but then that can be challenged. 153C notice, there is no material, or even if material is there, now the issue has become time barred, because as per the law which is laid down, the 153C proceedings must start within a reasonable time from framing of the assessment under 153A. It is now sought to be issued beyond a period of 3 years. After 3 years from the date of filing or framing of the assessment in the case of a search person, 153C notice is issued. I can always challenge it. 154 notice beyond 4 years, challengeable. 179 notice without giving an opportunity, challengeable. 263 notice on the face of it, no revision, challengeable. 270 capital A notice again is something which is can be challenged in a given case. But mind you, what you need to remember is that here the burden is higher on you to establish that even at a show cause notice stage, you want indulgence of the court, because you must be in a position to demonstrate, and that too without any doubt, that this action is palpably without jurisdiction. If you are in a slightest of the doubt, or if it requires examination of facts to put across your point, then probably you are better off going before the authority, submitting your reply, and wait for proper opportunity to challenge the action. I said earlier that 148 notice can be challenged. The scheme of the act is that it can be challenged on ground of limitation, escapement of income not represented in the form of assets, expenditure, or a book entry, below 50 lakhs, and the reopening is beyond a period of 3 years. Many a times you come across a case where, let's take an example, that there is a search at a builder's premise. There is a flat of rupees 80 lakhs where the cash payment is, let's say, 70 lakhs of rupees. However, the flat is purchased in the joint name of husband and wife. And therefore, argument is that, sir, individually, both have given 35 lakhs each. And therefore, both are falling within 50 lakhs. And your reopening action beyond a period of 3 years is not justified, because even otherwise, it is not maintainable. Now, High Court again would be reluctant, because today we do not have the proof, or we do not have a method whereby we can find out whether the sharing is in 50-50% or in some other percentage, whether the cash is given by husband, wife, to what extent. Therefore, courts would be extremely reluctant. Some High Court have nonetheless taken a view that you are right, it is a 50-50, and therefore 35 lakhs cash, which is below 50, and therefore no reopening. But then again, court would be not very happy when it comes to speculating on the facts. Information as defined under 148, 6 heads of information. If any information which is not falling within those 6 heads, you have a case. Change of opinion, it's basically still holding the field, even if lot of people would argue that under the new scheme it is information driven, and therefore there is no question of change of opinion. The moment you have information, you have a fresh opinion, license to form a fresh opinion. But then courts have consistently taken a view, Bombay, Gujarat, Delhi, that even under the new scheme, change of opinion is not permissible. No escapement at all. There is a allegation against me that I have entered into a transaction with a Hawala operator. But what is that transaction? I have sold material to that Hawala operator. And therefore, that income is already there in my books of accounts. And therefore, there is no escapement. If there is no escapement, there is no question of 148. So these are all the facets of notice where one can challenge straightway before the court. And then that would take me to the challenge to the search. I mentioned earlier that uh, challenge to the search. Look, so far as the challenge to the search is concerned, probably there are hardly handful of decisions wherein the search is declared as an illegal search. And again, even if you challenge a search, supposing you are successful in convincing the court that, sir, my search is illegal, under the Indian Evidence Act, read with Income Tax Act, and read with the judgment of Puranmal, the consistent view is that even in an illegal search, material gathered can always be used for the purpose of assessment. Therefore, there is no sense in challenging a search provision. However, this was a peculiar case, and this has, in fact, uh, again rekindled the interest in challenging the search provision, because this was a search where the allegation was that human rights are violated in a lock, stock, and barrel manner. Gross violations. CCTV cameras were switched off. I'm told that it is in the SOP of the income tax that every time they search someone, the first thing they do is they switch off the CCTV cameras. Uh, insofar as other aspects of the violation of principles of natural justice are concerned, there was medical treatment which was denied, and then there was high-handed approach, which is usually there in all kinds of searches, and therefore the search came to be challenged before the High Court. High Court, again, the moment you challenge a search, the investigation file would come before the High Court, and that investigation file again would contain the reason to believe why the search is taking place. And the search, why the search is taking place, again we'll have the detailed report of the investigation wing of the Income Tax Department. And most often, more often than not, and most of the time, you would find that those are detailed notes, and there are certain indications, and court on the face of it, after reading it, usually is convinced that this material is available. Now again, at that stage, what is required to be decided by the court is availability of some reason to believe. They would not go into the sufficiency of those reasons. They would not sit in the chair of a commissioner and say that, no, no, sir, we believe that material is there, but it is not so severe that the search can take place. So sufficiency is not to be examined. Material usually is there. Therefore, reason to believe is there, and therefore search is, most of the time, the challenge to search is fail. Here also, on the ground that there are reasons to believe, the challenge to search fail, on the ground that declare that search to be an illegal search. However, there was one more argument which was canvassed before the Madras High Court, and that was insofar as violations of human rights are concerned. The trump card of the argument was that because of all this CCTV switching off and illegal confinement, deprivation of medical treatment, and all those things collectively would violate the human rights, and those are considered as a fundamental right. So what you have done is, in the guise of carrying out a search, you have violated my privacy, and therefore right to privacy, which has now become a fundamental right after 2017, this Puttaswamy's case, which was in the context of Aadhaar, etc. 2017-10 SCC 1, that right to privacy is a fundamental right, and that right can be violated only if one of these four criteria are there. Probably action is sanctioned by law, therefore first is not present. The proposed action must be necessary in the democratic society for legitimate aim. Yes, courts have time and again said that searches are legitimate because Parliament has every right to enact a law which entitles the department to come and visit you in order to find out the hidden undisclosed income. Then there must be procedural guarantee against the abuse. That is also there because detailed SOPs are there. There are rules governing the searches, and therefore every procedural aspect is safeguard is there. However, the last bullet, the extent of such interference must be proportionate to the need for the interference. That is doctrine of proportionality. In order to find out the undisclosed income, is it necessary or is it justified that you violate the fundamental right, namely the right to privacy? And that is where the court said that no, you cannot. And therefore, court declared the search as unconstitutional, as against an illegal search. Court said that something which is unconstitutional can never have any repercussions, can never have any consequences. So, insofar as illegal searches are concerned, Puranmal is still holding the field. However, insofar as unconstitutional searches are concerned, one can now argue that you cannot even use the material which is gathered from unconstitutional search, and therefore the whole thing is a known as thing. It does not exist in the eye of law. The whole thing must go out, and therefore anything which is happening post unconstitutional search would be treated as fruits of a poisonous tree, which is untouchable. Therefore, you can't touch those evidences at all. Again, the judgments on that. So, therefore, the last facet of the challenge before the High Court is the principles of natural justice that I mentioned earlier. That if an order, though appealable, is in gross violations of principles of natural justice, we must get an opportunity to bypass the gamut of appellate proceedings. Because look what will happen. Supposing an assessment order is framed, not giving you proper opportunity, you have to prefer an appeal. Again, the demand would be raised. Maybe you are called upon to pay 20% of the demand. Unless you pay 20%, you will not get the stay. So first appeal, even if you succeed, revenue would go before the tribunal. If you lose, you have to go before the tribunal. Tribunal will take couple of years in deciding. You go before the High Court. Again, time would be wasted. Minimum waiting time is around 8 to 10 years before the High Court. So all those things are unnecessary if court finds that your order is uh, in violation of principles of natural justice, and therefore you may not have to go through that appellate gamut. So what are the principles of natural justice and how it can be said to have been violated? So audi alteram partem is a basic principle that in case if there is adverse inference or in case of any adverse order, you must be given a proper opportunity. So assessment proceedings are now held to be quasi-judicial. Recent judgment of Rajiv Bansal, a paragraph is devoted to that. And therefore, during the entire assessment process, natural justice are required to be followed. So you must be given a reasonable opportunity. Opportunity of hearing must not be an eyewash. It must be a real and actual opportunity. And if it is an eyewash or if it is not effective or practical, supposing at 10 o'clock in the morning, there is an email which is there in your inbox saying that, sir, we are having a VC video conferencing at 11 o'clock today. So now within 1 hour, how are you going to prepare and appear online? That is, therefore, that is not practical or effective opportunity. It's just an eyewash because you ask for it, we give you, but give you at such a short notice that you can never actually utilize that opportunity. So that is violation of principles of natural justice. Uh, as I stated earlier, that this can be bifurcated, that if it is in a biased manner, or if it is notice is given or not given. If notice given, no evidences, material or documents are supplied along with that notice, which are known as relied upon documents, then it is bad in law. Reasonable time to respond not granted, bad in law. Personal hearing, if you ask for it, not granted, bad in law. An order, even after you submit everything, if it's a one line order that I do not find substance in the submission of the SSA and therefore I reject the same and I make the addition, this is not a speaking order. The authority must give reasons which are self speaking. They must know, the person who is reading the order must know that these are the grounds on which my case is decided. Uh, Various illustration on what basis you can challenge. Your SOCO is issued before compliance date, assessment order is framed, you ask for adjournment is denied, or you are not even informed whether it is granted, denied. It just lands in their inbox. They don't respond to the adjournment application at all, and suddenly the order is framed. Uh, Adjournment sought for, date granted, and immediately before that date, order is framed. Uh, my reply, which is filed, detailed reply is filed, not at all considered. Not at all considered, fine. However, if it is considered, but the manner in which I want the officer to consider, probably that may not be a ground for the natural justice violation, because this is always bound to be difference between the manner in which I want to convey something and authority want to receive something. Uh, Few hours VC, that is video conferencing, asked for, not granted, granted, but due to technical difficulties, not availed of, again violation. Reference to valuation officer, you ask for it because edition is under 50C, you say that's a refer the matter to valuation officer, he doesn't do it, again violation of principles of natural justice. As I said earlier, that there is a concept known as under Article 226, there are two facets to it. And the concept is, one concept is that can you file a writ against an order where appeal is provided. So it's something known as the maintainability of the writ, that whether writ is maintainable when there is an alternate efficacious remedy, which is provided under the statute. So any order passed under the Income Tax Act, supposing if it is an assessment order, there is an appeal provided under 246A of the Act. So whether my rate is maintainable or not, that is one part of it. Courts have said, again, Calcutta Discount and Walpur, both are Supreme Court judgments. The courts have said that it all again depends. And there are four criteria which are broadly defined by the court, whether that you are falling within any of those criteria or no. Those criteria are that fundamental rights are violated, principles of natural justice, the action is wholly without jurisdiction, and virus of the legislation is challenged. In case if you fall in any of these four criteria, then even if there is an appeal provision, court would find the rate is maintainable. However, maintainability is not an end by itself. There is a concept known as entertainability. So maintainability is basically you can enter the High Court. Now, High Court would entertain your petition or no, that would depend on the discretion of the judge. And therefore, there is a fundamental difference between a maintainability. All these judgments are on maintainability. Entertainability is something which is absolutely subjective. In a given case, court finds that maybe your petition is maintainable, but I don't want to give you indulgence because I believe that you are an entry provider, and because this is a relief which is on equitable grounds, I do not want to give you indulgence. You go before the authority and make your submission. Then probably your writ may not even be entertained. So entertainability is something different than the maintainability. Uh, Equitable relief, the moment you say that I want to file a writ petition, you must go there with a clean hands. If you do not disclose material facts, if you suppress something which is according to the court, again, this is not your discretion. You have to mention each and every fact. You may feel that this is not a very material fact, therefore I'll not mention it. That is not something which is permissible. And I've seen matters being thrown out on the ground that you are not going there with a clean hands. If you do not mention in the chronological event, supposing there is a statement which is recorded, a copy is supplied to you, however that supply of that copy is without any forwarding letter, and it is only uploaded on the portal, you would think that, sir, who would come to know that I have been supplied with a copy of the statement? You write that copy of the statement is also not supplied because in the later communication there is a reference, but there is no statement, acknowledgement of receipt of statement on my part. May not, it is not advisable because the department might come there with the screenshot, and that they might prove that we have already given and it is downloaded by the SSE. The statements are available. This is material misstatement, and it might expose you to exemplary cost by the High Court. Uh, Taxes and equity, again, we often hear that they do not go hands in hand, but that efforts must be made so as to make them meet somehow. If it is something which is not as per rule of law, then again court would give an indulgence. Order against the settled position of law, binding jurisdictional judgments not followed. Supposing a tribunal refuses to follow the binding High Court judgment, in the case of in the Mumbai High Court HDFC Bank's case 14A, the binding judgment of the High Court was not followed by the tribunal, and tribunal tried to distinguish that order on various factual grounds. High Court came down heavily on tribunal, pointing out that you cannot do it in a read jurisdiction, and they passed an order setting aside the order of the tribunal. So binding jurisdictional judgments, if not followed, will give you an opportunity to approach the case. Refund not granted. Again, CPC will say that JO will grant you the refund. JO will say that no, sir, only CPC can grant you the refund, and they are playing cat and mouse. You can approach the court. Stay not granted. Your orders are not disposed of. Any other inaction. Supposing you believe that a CIT appeal order is passed because now the penalty is initiated, however, that order is not served on you, and without service of that order, you cannot take the appellate proceedings. You can approach the court for service of such an order as well. Article 141 is again, as I stated earlier, we have a written constitution where the Supreme Court said that their judgments are binding on all the authorities across the country, and therefore we don't have to find anything beyond Article 150, 141. That again, Article 142 is not an issue over here, so this would take care of the presentation. I think yes, we are 6:35. So now the floor is open for question answers. If at all any questions are there, I'll give the answers. Have we received any questions?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. There are a few questions.
Mhm.
So the first question we have received is, what is the remedy when an income tax first appeal has not been taken up after 3 years of filing?
Uh, I have one or two counter questions as well. If the first appeal is not taken up, then have we filed the written submissions and paper book? The first thing that one must do is whenever they find that first appeal is pending, now almost all the first appeals, the portal is enabled, so you can always upload your written submissions and paper book. The first thing that you do is upload your written submissions and paper book. Second thing is, if the demand is more than 1 crore of rupees, then as per the board circular, you must address a letter saying that my appeal may be decided on priority basis. Having done this, if you still believe that your appeal is not taken up, then giving reference of section 256A, you can write a letter that within 1 year you have to decide my appeal. Failing which, I must get unconditional stay against the outstanding demand. Whatever is that demand, even if you have paid 20%, not paid 20%, you are entitled for an unconditional stay. Gujarat High Court in case of Om Infra Space has came down very heavily on the revenue authorities, and they have laid down the law that in case if there is no fault of the SSE, and if you are not deciding the appeal because of any reasons, then you must give unconditional stay to the SSEs in question. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. The next question we had is, how to face the challenge of orders against which appeal is not provided?
Uh, I have already covered that orders. I have given large number of examples also during my presentation where the appeal is not provided. The only remedy is you can file a writ petition before the High Court. If at all it is falling within the purview of 119(2)(b), you can approach the board and ask for the appropriate relief. If you believe that even the commissioner can do justice to you, you can also file a revision application under section 264. These are three options which are available where there is no appeal provision.
Okay. The next question we had is, what are the common mistakes that has been done while filing writ petition and how to avoid it?
Uh, there are there are no such common mistakes, but more often than not, what I find is that the facts are not properly mentioned. So the first thing that you must do is, because this is, as I mentioned earlier, this is an equitable relief. The first thing that you must do is mention all the facts chronologically, beginning with the date of filing of return, and in case if any registration etc. is in question, then start from the date of registration etc., or start from date of filing of the return till the cause of action which is under challenge, and do not miss out on any of the facts. Insofar as contentions are concerned, probably even if you have not mentioned one or two legal contentions, it is always open before the court to take a legal contention, because income tax rates are not very hyper technical. There, even if there are no pleadings, court would always usually allow you to argue something, or would give an opportunity to amend your petition, incorporate that legal argument, and then continue on the next occasion. However, any error on the facts would be fatal. So, in case if you mention wrong facts, or if you do not disclose a particular fact, maybe deliberate, non-deliberate, that is not an issue. But if something is not coming out clearly, that would be end of the matter, and that is a one mistake which one must avoid in filing a writ petition. Yes, over
Thank
to
you,
you.
sir. The next question is STT can be considered as illegal or excess tax?
What is that? Sorry,
Is STT can
STT.
be
Okay,
STT
Securities
can
Transaction Tax.
yes, can be
Uh,
considered as illegal or excess tax?
Uh, Look, STT, if you look at the percentages, probably may not be considered as an excessive, but certainly, yes, illegal. I do not know. One will have to develop the case for that, and one would find out whether it has a flavor of a direct tax or an indirect tax, because STT is based on the turnover of a particular security in the securities market. Whatever is the turnover, based on that, some levy is there, and that percentage is minuscule. So one can argue that this is dehors my income, because ultimately it does not have the levy of a GST, because it is neither goods nor services. Therefore, that is outside the purview of GST. It is nor on income, because even if you are making losses in a underlying trade, STT is still payable, and therefore one can argue that it is not with the authority. In a given case, a writ petition can always be filed if at all legal proper research is there. But as of now, if going by the settled law, there is a presumption as regards constitutionality, there is a presumption as regards competence of the parliament to enact the law. And therefore, if you are alleging that it is not so, the burden is on you. To me, it appears neither excessive nor penal in nature.
Okay. Um, the last question for today we had is can you please share your thoughts on recent striking down of provisions of Tribunal Reforms Act sixth time?
A very not very relevant for the day, but nonetheless, look, the the whole idea is our constitution and the whole democratic setup is segregation of power between the executives and the parliament. The whole idea is that on one hand we have a parliament which is independent, which would enact the law. On another hand, we have executives who would enforce the law. And on the third pillar, we have judiciary, which is completely independent of both of this. Now, tribunal, it falls under Ministry of Law and Justice, and it is supposed to be independent of the income tax department. Unlike the again, even the commissioner appeals, though they are on the payroll of the Ministry of Finance, they are not governed by CBDT circulars also, because 119 itself says that there is no mechanism whereby they control the commissioner appeals. But that said, we all know that they are all governed by the Ministry of Finance, that the predominant idea is to collect the taxes. Whereas tribunal being a body which is independent, I'm purely restricting myself only to the income tax appellate tribunal and not going beyond that. Income tax tribunal again falls within the Ministry of Law and Justice. And therefore, the whole idea is that we must have independent judges who treat both the sides as equal, namely the SSA sides as well as the departmental side. Because before the tribunal, there are two parties who are contesting. Nobody is closer to the bench, nobody is further from the bench. Both are equal, both have equal rights in the court of law. Now, what is happening is in series of these enactments, the procedure for appointment of member, including the selection process, is made in such a way that the impartiality is put at stake. Imagine a situation where a professional having 10 or 15 plus years of experience is called upon to add on the bench, and that appointment is only for a period of 4 years. We have the in fact 2021 appointments are coming to an end on 11th of December 2025, because of for 4 years they are there. uh, they are always under the fear that whether my reappointment is taking place or no, because have I passed any order so as to antagonize the government, and I may not get even my reappointment letter from the government. After the retirement, again, I am not uh, allowed to practice before the appellate tribunal. So, which person of right mind would leave his existing practice, her existing practice, and go there with an uncertain future, wherein your performance again would decide whether you are going to be reappointed after a period of 4 years or no. And that evaluation criteria is something which is secret. Nobody knows on what basis you get re-elected, reassigned. So that is the reason why court said that no, this is something which is absolutely not correct. We need good judges to give good judgments. Unless we attract good talent on the benches, we all taxpayer of the country would suffer. And therefore, my view is court has done exactly the right thing, because it is nothing. The old law is now enacted. However, this judgment has created more confusion, because kindly imagine, judgment says that 2021, 20 and 21, 1920 Act itself is not within the framework of the constitution, therefore ultra virus. Now, the latest appointments of the tribunal members are done under this act only. So if the act is declared ultra virus, what would happen to those appointments? One interesting question. Second, they say that we'll make some commission. Court said that let us make some commission which would oversee all these appointments and reappointment, etc. That commission today is not there. So what will happen during this twilight zone? Till the commission is formed, till the appointments are regularized, we do not know. So a very good institution, probably everybody calls this a mother tribunal. The income tax tribunal is known as a mother tribunal. And we are today we see that this mother is rendered like it has become a beggar. It is now running on the street, and there are no sons who are taking care of that mother. So my view is that government must come out strongly. They must come out with a law which is equitable to someone who is sacrificing his or her career and going there. Then all kinds of support must be there, and assurance must be there that whatever decisions are there, your judicial independence would be uh, protected at any cost. If that message is loud and clear, we would attract good judges. We taxpayers would feel safer in the coming days. If that message is not put across very clearly, probably we'll have a tougher time in days to come. That's all.
Thank you so much. We have received few more questions, so if you permit, I'll share those
Okay.
questions.
I think yes, yes.
The refund application is filed to ITO for 3 years back for AY 1011 on IT80 order received in favor of assessee. But ITO is not sanctioning refund, and they have been changing ITO every time. So, what is the remedy?
You can approach, write a letter to the head, namely the commissioner or principal commissioner, whoever is the range head, and if that does not solve the problem, raise a ticket on CP gram, because many a times that CP gram mechanism is also equally effective. If CP gram also does not solve it, then probably you may go to the high court. Look, the reason I say that go to the High Court at the last is A, High Court is maybe time consuming, B, expensive, and C, once you go before the High Court, all these authorities will raise their heads and say that now matter is sub judice, we will not touch it. So keep High Court as a last resort, but you can always do any of these things first.
Okay. The next question we have is, in case an AO passes a wrong order, what is the appropriate remedy for the assessee? Appeal or revision of the order?
I personally would believe that appeal is a better option, because there you get more than one shot. First appeal, second appeal, third appeal, and maybe Supreme Court fourth appeal. So you get four shots at the same thing. Before in the revision, my personal experience is commissioners are extremely reluctant in granting any relief under 264, and therefore you will not find any relief in 264. If at all 264 relief is not there, the only recourse is High Court writ petition. And High Court writ petition again is a double-edged sword, because High Court would not entertain your case on merits. It will only decide whether 264 discretion is exercised judicially or no. If it is exercised in a judicious manner, High Court would approve it. If it is not, High Court would send you back to the file of the commissioner. That this discretion is not exercised judiciously. So therefore, 264 many a times it's a futile exercise. Better is you prefer an appeal.
The next question is, can a group of people together file an appeal?
No, it's a not it's individual cause of action. You can't file a group appeal. It is only the person against whom the order is passed has to file an appeal. Let me give you an interesting example. there is something known as locus standi. In case if you have an appeal, you must have a locus insofar as filing of that appeal is concerned. There was this assessment order wherein assessing officer passed some nasty comments against the chartered accountant who appeared before the assessing officer. He has written something that this authorized officer or authorized representative of the SSE has not furnished documents properly and misrepresented many things. So those observations were hurting the chartered accountant. He decided to file an appeal against that order. Commissioner dismissed that appeal on the ground that, sir, you do not have a locus, because 246, though the language is wide, any SSE who is aggrieved by the order of the commissioner, he says that I am an SSA because I am independently paying the taxes and I am aggrieved by this order. Therefore, my appeal is maintainable. Commissioner threw him out. Ultimately, I advised him to file a writ petition. We got those paragraph expunged from the order. Therefore, it's not that anyone and everyone can join their hands and file an appeal against a particular order. Only the appellant can file it.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. That was the end of the questions we had. So thank you so much, sir. In conclusion, I would thank every participant and sir you for such an enlightening session. We deeply appreciate the valuable insight shared by you as our guest speaker. Thank you so much. And thank you to all our participants.
Thank you very much. Jai Hind.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.